This is all sewn by hand. She freehanded all of this. It's just the craftsmanship is amazing. So these are the pictures that I have of the women in my family that made these quilts. There's Jenny Jackson, who is my great-grandmother, and then her daughter, Alice, which would be my great-aunt, and they were quilters of the family and just artists, really. So these unfinished quilts were passed down to me a few years ago, and I'm in the process of either finishing them or recreating them. Not a lot of people in my family are fiber artists. I've always kind of gravitated towards quilting and fabrics and just any type of craft that you can do with your hands. I grew up around these quilts, and they're a piece of the family, and I think it's really special that I get to be the one that finishes them, whether as quilts or as other pieces of art, whatever that looks like. So this is one of the quilts that I restored, and I did leave in the imperfections. I think that kind of adds to it. So she hand-pieced all the squares together, and then I machine quilted them together. I did use a self-binding, as that's mostly how they would bind their quilts, like bringing it from the back to the front, but I do hand-stitch my binding on. One of them I gave to my grandmother, and she said it's a perfect lap quilt because she's in a wheelchair. And then, yeah, I sign all of them. Made with Love by Jenny Jackson and Melissa. I'm working on a quilt for my niece. Part of the challenge here is that I don't have enough for a backing, so I will need to purchase some fabric for the backing of a quilt. The tricky part there is that it's getting harder to source large pieces of fabric like backing. I think part of the challenge of making a quilt right now is the lack of accessibility with materials. You know, you've got big box stores closing down. Working in a physical medium, it's very tactile, and it helps a lot to touch the fabric and see it in person. We're headed to Wildflower Quilt Co. It's an independent local quilt store. There aren't that many of these around, and hopefully they'll have the fabric we're looking for. You are creating a bespoke piece for somebody, making something that nobody else has and that you really can't duplicate. It's part of the joy and the challenge. I love all the independent brands. I mean, you can tell it's really high quality cotton, which is tricky to find, but that's definitely what I'm looking for. They're not meant to last forever, but I want them to last as long as possible. I like this one because it's a little whimsical, but it's also something that my niece could grow with. Could I do a yard and a half of this one?
Sure.
Okay. This is so cute.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
$3.17 today.
Okay.
Would you like a bag?
I don't know the first quilt that I made, but I was probably my daughter's age. I think I was about 8, maybe 9. I think the responsibility is not so much that I want my daughter to carry on this legacy. Like, oh, if I don't finish these quilts, I want her to do that. I don't think it's that. I think it's more of they made these things to be used and to be loved. And you can look at something like the green quilts and it's completely tattered and torn to pieces and everything. And you can look at that and say, oh, what a shame. But I look at that and I say, okay, that was loved. You know, somebody used that. Somebody had that on their bed for years as a child, and it gave them joy. That is kind of what I'm trying to pass on to her, the joy of making something and the joy of creating. I'm literally piecing together parts of their life with parts of mine and, you know, melding the two together. I think that's how I'm carrying on this tradition of fiber arts from their generation to mine.